Welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. In today's session, I would like to pause and take a step back and address what I think perhaps um, might be a useful way of understanding some of the ideas that I have been sharing relating to how the mind works and how our thoughts create the results in our lives. We understand as human beings, irrespective of how old you are, once you've got to the age of reason, there is an understanding that there are certain laws that operate in this beautiful universe that we have. Some of these laws are physical, some are mental, psychological, and some are spiritual. We generally call these laws either laws of nature or scientific laws. It doesn't matter what category we place them under, we can use the laws to explain the relationship between things, the mechanism that occurs between things, the cause-effect relationship between things. The laws are there because in many ways they are built into the inherent nature of how things operate. Knowledge of the laws enables you to work with the laws to ensure that you can actually achieve whatever you want. Ignorance of the law doesn't limit the law. The law is always working, but unfortunately, the ignorance stands as an obstacle in the working relationship between you, the individual, and the outcome that you desire. There are laws. We talk about the laws of cause and effect, the laws of action and reaction, the law of sowing and reaping. These are one and the same laws explained through different prisms: science, theology, and natural methods. In today's session, however, I want to talk about the law of attraction. Now, I will talk about this law rather briefly because in sessions that might follow, there might be a better opportunity for me to expand on these laws. Now, whilst I have referred to the law of attraction, my focus primarily would not be on attraction. It will be on a secondary law that undergirds and supports the law of attraction. But I use the law of attraction because it is the law that most people are familiar with. Now, many years ago, there was a book and a movie series or a movie production called The Secret. The book and the movie popularized the whole concept of law of attraction, something that most people had known, perhaps not as deeply as they now do, but something people intuited previously. The law drew to people's attention that we are attracting things into our lives, positive and negative, but we are attracting nonetheless. There was one aspect of the movie and the book which perhaps, not to put it across as a criticism, but perhaps should have been emphasized a little bit more. And this has to do with the secondary law that I will be addressing in a few short minutes. Now, the absence of the emphasis on this secondary law meant that most people, even when we talk about the law of attraction, we don't deal with and use the law of attraction in the most effective manner. You don't just attract whatever you want. There are certain things that you must do first in order to be in the state of attraction, in order to draw to you what you want. Depression and anxiety operate under the law of attraction. But even fundamentally, they operate primarily under this secondary law that I am referring to. And therefore, if you are struggling with depression, again, I have to say this always, I exclude clinical depression, which is the really severe form of depression. And I am generalizing across most of what we see in the West, particularly with regards to mental health issues. If you have any concern, if you are suffering from mental health issues, anxiety or depression, You can understand and you can explain and you can cure your ailments and your challenges and the difficult experiences you're going through if you understand, firstly, the law of attraction, but more importantly, the secondary law. We attract into our lives whatever we focus on. And by focus, I'm not just simply saying by virtue of your sensory faculties or your senses, sight. I'm talking about primarily our thoughts and our feelings. We attract into our lives what we want, but also we attract into our lives what we fear. Now, this is part of the reason why in sessions prior I explained that faith comes by what you hear, but faith leaves also by what you hear. Fear comes by what you hear, fear leaves by what you hear. Both are opposite sides of the same coin. In order to develop our faith, we use our imagination, but similarly, we can use our fear in our imagination. Hence, fear is the wrong use of the imagination. But irrespective, one is a positive form of, you might say, frequency or energy, and the other negative. But the working power does not distinguish or discriminate between which is gifted to it. It takes whatever raw materials you provide and it produces in like manner for you. So people who suffer from depression fundamentally have a lack of understanding, in my opinion, at the core with regards to the laws of nature, but particularly the laws that affect them. You are attracted, and if you have depression, you have attracted into your life whatever form of suffering that you might be going through. Now, this is a very difficult thing to listen to and to hear, but recognize that nothing is without cause. And that the key question is not to try and challenge and refute the position, but to ask a simple question. If the outcomes in my life are a result of what I have attracted, then what methodology have I used, even in my ignorance or without my knowledge, have I used to attract what I do not want? So there are some people who attract what they want, and there are people who attract what they loathe. And the key question is, if both are using the same law, then understanding the mechanism and the working principles of this law is the most important thing. The law and the laws of the universe, or the laws of nature, or the laws of science are always working, whether you are aware of them or you are not. It's important, therefore, to understand what the laws are, how they function, and how you must utilize them actively, not passively, but actively, either to keep away the negatives that you do not wish to experience, or to keep in the positives that you wish to experience. Now, I've said a lot so far, and I would hope that by now you are thinking, well, I have heard of the law of attraction. It can't be that complicated. It simply says you attract what you are. And if you do not like the results that you are getting, it means you have to change what you are. Your results are simply, or your outcomes are simply, a manifestation of what you have attracted. And what you attract, you do so by virtue of what occurs in your mind, in your subconscious mind particularly, but with regards to the relationship between what takes place in your conscious state and what is filtered and passed on to your subconscious state. Now, the law that is the primary law, the one I have alluded to so far, is the law of vibration. The law of vibration is the primary law. The law of attraction is the secondary law. You can't attract, you cannot go into a state of attracting what you want without being in the right frequency. When I use the word vibration, I am not referring to something quantum in its application. I'm talking about things that are very simple. By law of vibration, I'm talking about the law of energy. I'm talking about your present state of energy, the frequency, the resonance that you're operating in. Whatever that frequency or resonance is, you attract everything within that frequency. So depression is simply a resonance, a frequency, an energy level, a vibration. And how is it possible? And this is a question to you, that we know that in certain parts of the world, those who are the most poor and the most long-suffering, put it that way, seem to be in a different vibration and therefore do not attract depression despite their physical circumstances. And how is it, as we juxtapose this to the West, that most people in the West these days, particularly the younger ones, despite having as much abundance as possible, despite being the wealthiest we've ever been in history, being the most educated we've ever been in history, being the most empowered and supported we've ever been in history, having the least amount of deaths and wars and tribulations and all the suffering that we've ever had in history. How is it possible that we are the most, you might say, medicated by virtue of something we call depression, mental health, anxiety, worry, and we are so badly treated with regards to the medical profession that we almost, push ourselves into an early grave? Now, one of the reasons is simply because of the vibration we are on. For some reason, despite having all the abundance, we seem to be at a frequency level that is on par with depression. So let me take a step back. Depression is a vibration, it's a level, it's a set level. And let's just assume this level is at this point. The person who is born in Africa, in some parts of the Orient, in Asia, in South America, perhaps in a very poor village in Europe, despite having nothing on the physical plane, mentally and psychologically, they tend to find that their vibration state perhaps could be somewhere here. And for some other people, theirs is somewhere higher. Now, don't worry too much about whether the top one represents good or high in terms of hierarchy and scale, and the bottom being low. I'm not referring to it that way. It doesn't matter which. I'm simply saying that there is a frequency we call depression or anxiety. As a matter of fact, we tend to find that fear is a lower vibration, and it escalates. Oh, let me take a step back. Ignorance is a vibration, it's an energy state, it's a frequency. And at the next level, more ignorance and the wrong use of that ignorance set of understanding puts you in a state of worry and doubt. That's a different vibration. Worry and doubt sits below. In this particular instance, I'm referring to below as something lower, and perhaps, should I use the word, is lower, but maybe not as damaging. And above worry and doubt, you have fear. Fear is a vibration, which is part of the reason why whenever people are fearful, you tend to find that you can almost see a change in your physical state. It's part of the reason why something jumps out of the bush and you have this adrenaline rush. Yes, some of it is chemical and that are induced, etc. Whether you're talking about cortisol or you're talking about cortisol and the name escapes me now. But there are certain chemicals the body releases. The DHEA, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. But there are certain chemicals your body releases. It releases such chemicals sometimes on a second basis, second to second, or second to minute, minute to hour, and hour to days. Cortisol is one we release. And that is something that perhaps puts us in a state where we cannot be in a state of constant release of cortisol for a long time. So we have to move away from that position. Fear resonates at a level. Above fear is anxiety, which is even worse. Above anxiety is depression, which is even worse. And what we find is, for each of these levels, you can move into that level, you can move away from that level. The levels remain. So the whole concept that depression is a new phenomenon is just wrong. In this particular point, at this particular point in time, as you listen to me, you may not believe this. And if I were to keep my mouth shut, there is music playing in the room as I speak. There are sounds playing in the room as I speak. You cannot hear them. I cannot hear them. But if I were to pick up my phone or get a radio and I turn the dial to FM and I keep turning the dial, eventually I would tune into a frequency. BBC Radio, BBC Radio 1 Extra, Capital Music, Absolute Radio. All of these occupy certain frequencies: 99.7 FM, 96.1 FM, 94.7 FM. These are all frequencies. And on every frequency, what you find is if you tune into the frequency, you get and you attract whatever is on that same frequency. For some people, depending on where you are, it might be music. For some other people, you tune in, it might be the news. For some other people, it's just a symphony. But there are vibrations always and at all times. The question is, what vibration are you in alignment with? And what is your vibration? So depression is simply a vibration. How do you get rid of depression? You step out of that vibration. By depression, the person born in Africa, born in Western Asia, in a poor country, chooses by their actions to either move up to the state of vibration, and if they stay there long enough, they attract depression into their lives via the law of vibration. And that process takes place through the law of attraction. I'll say that again. Vibration is a frequency, it's an energy state, is a level. Any one of us, we can get into this level, and if we stay there, as soon as we get into that level, it will be the same as you tune into a radio station, 99.7. Well, you don't have to stay there. You can tune and then you can move forward. So I turn the radio dial and I get to 99.7 and I listen for a few seconds and I move on. I want 105. Oh, that's the music I want to listen to. I ignore all of the other frequencies and stations because they're not consistent with what I'm looking for. And so people can move into a state of frequency with depression, but they do not stay there. The process of tuning into that state is a natural process. Where people suffer and where people struggle is we move into this state and we stay stuck. Because immediately we experience what that vibration is all about. The feeling, the attitude. What we tend to do is we stop. Like a car on a motorway driving, we break down and we stop and we stay stuck. Rather than step out of the vehicle and walk down to the call center and pick up the phone and say, this is an emergency, my vehicle has just broken down on the motorway, I'm on the hard shoulder, I need help. We stay stuck. And the longer we stay in that vibration, the more we attract in resonance with whatever we are on. Depression is a vibration. If you are in a state of depression, you have stayed in a state of vibration. But here's the key thing. When you move into that vibration state as depression, you're not really depressed yet. You have to attract depression. And that means the one thing that has to take place is this acceptance. Very important statement, and I'm sorry if I'm putting this across very poorly. It's not part of my ability to be good as a good orator, and I'm perhaps not using the right words, and perhaps I say things that cause a few people to be upset. If it's too hard to understand, close your eyes and let the resident speak. Take the message as it is. Don't worry too much about what is said or how it is said and the delivery and the tone. Don't try to tone police, but recognize what I'm saying, which is key. You cannot, for the majority of people, be depressed. Even when you move into the state and the resonance or that frequency called depression, you cannot attract depression until you accept. Now we accept by implicit actions or by explicit actions. Explicit could be where people say, well, I guess this is my mother had depression, my sisters had depression, it runs in our family, well, maybe it's just mine. Or other people who, they do not say much, but they attract depression nonetheless because the act, in law, there's something called representations. There's explicit representation and implicit representation, but there's also misrepresentation. And one of the things that occurs in law is, if you understand law, sometimes a misrepresentation can come as a result of what is said. It can also come about by what is excluded, despite being asked. So for example, if someone says, you're selling this laptop, have you had any issues with the laptop? If you deliberately exclude information that you know to be otherwise, then you've intentionally misrepresented the state of the laptop. But there's also silence. Now, silence is a very tricky one because the key question then comes, well, when does silence become a misrepresentation? Does it happen because you say nothing? Or does it happen because you were asked and you say nothing, despite knowing that your silence was being perceived to be perhaps to the contrary? In the same way, the vibration called depression, you have to accept, and acceptance can be explicit. Acceptance can also be implicit, and this is where people just do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing, but without realizing that you are accepted nonetheless. Your silence is an acceptance. So, as I bring this to a close, keep the following in mind. There are laws that govern the universe. These laws are there to help us, to guide us, to make life more meaningful for us. The laws are working. They work whether you believe they exist or not. Your ignorance of the laws doesn't reduce or neglect the power of the law. The law can be used. The law is not discriminating in its ability. It doesn't judge. It just takes whatever you place on it, like a multiplier, and it multiplies and it gives it back to you. To put it in a different way, the laws of the universe work in this manner. Whatever you give to it, it takes it from you, it multiplies it, and then it gives it back to you. It always comes back in good measures. You don't reap at the same time as you sow. Sometimes it takes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes 2 days, it doesn't matter, but you will reap whatever you've sown, because the law is not a respecter of persons. Depression is a vibration. In order for you to be depressed, it means you've moved up to the same frequency as depression, and you have accepted. And by acceptance, you activate the law of attraction. Attraction brings it to you. Vibration keeps it with you. Let me say that again. Attraction brings depression to you. Your vibration keeps depression with you. And so one of the first things to understand is, if you want to get out of this state of anxiety and worry and constant uncertainty mentally, you have to move away from that vibration state. You have to step down or you have to step up. Now you can choose whether stepping up represents something, a higher power, a more empowering place, or whether stepping down means a less disempowering place. For some people, as much as I would like to say, just let go and let God. You know, divorce your past, let go of the suffering, let go of depression, move up to something higher. I'm also aware of the fact that some people, it will take gradual steps. So for you, it might be, I'm depressed, or not even that. I'd like to kill myself. I'm at the point of death and destruction. And that's because I'm depressed. And for some people, it might mean taking a step back from that position where you think, I just want out, and coming down to a place where you say, well, I feel depressed. And then the next step might be, well, I don't feel as depressed as I used to, but I still feel anxious. And then the next step might be, well, I don't feel depressed. I don't feel like killing myself. I don't feel depressed. I don't feel anxious, but I still feel fearful. And then the next step down could also be, I don't feel any of the above, but also I don't feel fearful, but I have worry and doubt. You can take a gradual step down. It's entirely up to you. In many ways, for some people, because this journey and this cross is yours to bear and carry, there is no real way. There are effective ways of getting through, but there is no real way. This might be your story. This might be the stage that has been set for you. There's a script you're trying to play. And guess what? At the end of the day, it's all forgiven. Whether you know or you don't know, at the end of the day, it's all forgiven. This play that we call life plays out itself. And whether you take the path of least resistance and say, I want out, it's all forgiven eventually. Whether you actually take a step backwards and de-escalate and say, I'll choose a noble cause and I'll bear the cross properly, it's all forgiven. The point being, it's all forgiven. But you have to understand the laws, because absent this knowledge of the laws, we suffer, without cause and without reason. We are not destined to suffer in this life. Your birthright was not suffering. Yes, you were going to go through some suffering, but it wasn't a promise that you would stay in suffering. And so I would encourage you to spend some time and study the laws. In the sessions that follow, perhaps I'll go into a few more laws, but I'd like to get back at some point back to habits, paradigms, thoughts, and desires. Let me leave you with this. I think I should have said this, and apologize for leaving it very late. The question I haven't answered, and I did not answer in this session, is, if all of these frequencies exist, how do we tune ourselves up or down into the frequency of vibration we are looking for? That I will cover in the session that follows.